All right, to wrap things up, we're going to talk about the room itself and how to treat it, or maybe even more, why you should treat your room. You see, any room you walk into has a natural acousticness. You see, any room you walk into has its own acoustic characteristics to it. A small room's going to have a quick decay of reverb, while a big cathedral room's going to have this huge, long reverb tail to it. Whether your room has a short ceiling or a tall ceiling, whether you've got a wide room or a narrow room, maybe you're a hall, whatever it is, each room has its own unique acoustic characteristics to it. And some parts of it may be good and other parts may not be good. So let's take a look at, for example, in this room here at my church. We've got a very wide room with a shallow front to back space. We've also got a very low ceiling. It's not a typical like hall or any kind of theater where we have a bigger ceiling that has a lot of air to move up top. So what are the good things and bad things about this? Well, because of that low ceiling, we don't have near as much of that large reverb tail that you might have at, say, like a gym. However, because of our wide room, we've got a lot of slapback and flutter echo that happens in this space, where the sound will come out of the PA and then it'll kind of bounce back and forth very quickly across this room because it can bounce up and down off the floor and ceiling as it makes its way to the walls. It just has this really weird fluttery sound to it. And if you've got all of this energy coming out of the PA system, bouncing off all the walls, it makes it kind of muddy up and smeary sounding. So how can we fix that? Well, we can put sound treatment panels on our walls and try and absorb some of this sound. Or if you're fortunate enough, you can even do diffusion panels. There's all kinds of different options when it comes to how to treat these spaces. So I'm going to tell you how we did ours, and maybe it might inspire you to continue down the road of looking at what it takes to sound treat your room, because I can't give you the advice for every room. Every room is different and you have to make decisions based upon how your room reacts to sound. So let me explain to you how we took care of our room at its current state. So the first thing that happened in this room was we had these very large 2-inch panels made. And these kind of capture the majority of the high-end frequencies. Because they're 2-inch, they don't do full low-end to mid-range. They're more mid-range to high-end range. That's okay because a lot of this is what we hear. And so we use these to kind of help cut down on that main flutter. Now, there's still quite a bit of blank spaces around the room that need to be treated still. This is what we had to work with in our budget for the current time. But what it does is it helps cut down that initial hit. There's still quite a bit of flutter every now and then, depending on how it sounds and the frequencies, but it cuts it down significantly. Now, you'll also see at front of house, we've got panels on the back wall as well as in front of the front of house booth, and that's just to pick up what hits those walls directly from the PA. Because a lot of what happens here is that you've got your direct sound and then you've got your secondary sound. So the direct sound, which is PA to wall, that reflection is what we first hear, and that creates the beginnings of problems. But there's always going to be some that come after that. So we have to find those second reflection points, which are kind of what happens around the room. Now, the other part we treated was our main back wall. The reason we wanted to do this was that we wanted to keep everything on the stage and not bleeding out as much as possible. We also wanted to make sure that the microphones only heard what we needed them to hear on that stage. So by doing that, it almost acts kind of like a studio-like environment where there's less reflections happening around the microphones. They're just picking up more of the direct sound. And it actually worked really well for the drum cage we set up because it actually keeps everything in that back wall. So it worked out for us kind of to double it as both sound treating the whole wall, but also creating a backstop and a back gobo, if you will, or back studio sound absorption panel for the drum cage. So my recommendation, honestly, is to begin doing research into what kind of sound panels are out there and what you can work in your budget. Find where your reflection points are in your room and begin looking at treating them with either sound treatment to capture the sound and kind of deaden it, or using diffusion panels to break up the sound and disperse it so it falls apart. There's all kinds of options out there. So I would highly recommend you begin your research into finding how you can best treat your room, because honestly, treating your room will help your mixes sound even better because you will be fighting less with the room's reverb and the room's problems. and you'll be doing more to focus on how to make things even better.